your trusted local news source, KCRG TV9.
Hello and welcome back to your trusted local podcast. I am Becky Phelps and this is Beth and Becky.
Hello.
We are so excited to bring you some of the top news stories that we have been talking about this weekend, going into last week. Some of these are some pretty big topics.
We did have big topics, and it feels like, for whatever reason, so much of what we do tends to be drowned out by the national attention on something that is going on within the Trump administration. That certainly happened in our newsroom yesterday when we were just trying to put newscasts together. And we always have our social media stuff up because a lot of our folks share news on social media. That's where we get a lot of story ideas. And all of a sudden, it was like the world started melting down with this conversation Elon Musk had been having, and it just ramped up. Criticizing President Trump, and boy, I just didn't like. What do we do with this as news presenters?
It was difficult because it seemed to come all at once out of nowhere. I'm still not sure that
the impetus
where it started at all, because they seemed to be very much in lockstep for much of President Trump's term so far.
For sure.
And now it was live. It's not tweeting anymore. Live posting?
I guess so. Live meltdowning. Live crashing out.
Live crashing out on X from Elon Musk against Trump in this one big, beautiful bill.
And that seems to be where it started, but honestly, you never know a person's heart. Maybe it started in a conversation none of us will ever be privy to, or an action that we won't know about till 5 years from now. All I know is I really felt, I did see one post from someone else that said, but think of the editors. And we are editors. One of my titles is managing editor, and how do we take all of this and make it into a story we can tell succinctly, help people understand why it might matter, and not fall into the frenzy that it was, and capture the fact and communicate the fact that it was insane.
What were those few hours like for you? Leading up to the 5 and 6 o'clock newscasts.
Absolutely ignoring it, other than ignoring it for news, but keeping tabs was the first, vibe.
Because it really started in the afternoon.
And then in the afternoon, and then when there was some sort of statement, one of the posts was, I guess I will decommission the Dragon, which is a space shuttle that takes folks to and from the International Space Station, as well as supplies. It's in Los Angeles right now. My cousin works for SpaceX, so I'm a little bit more like...
You've got an in,
I do and I don't.
A little more than maybe I would.
I have never, ever, ever asked my cousin Matthew for any sort of inside scoop because it feels yucky. Like, it feels unfair. And also, we don't cover SpaceX on the reg.
Absolutely.
It's not our beat.
No, as local news here in Eastern Iowa, we do not have a lot of interaction with the space.
So I leave Matthew alone, and I think he appreciates that. He's a pretty private guy. And but I feel like I'm more tuned in, and I do care about it, maybe more than the average bear in Iowa. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh no, will my cousin lose his job? Like, this is my first reaction. So then it was or it may have been before that or after that, where President Trump was like, well, maybe you don't get all these contracts anymore. And there are quite a few contracts the U.S. government has with Elon Musk's SpaceX and, obviously Starlink, the satellite system.
Yes, that's huge.
So I pop up and I'm like, well, this feels bigger than an online squabble. And went to my boss. I go, what do we do with this? Do you know what I'm talking about? He goes, no, of course I am. Everybody in the world is following this. I'm like, well, that's not true. A lot of people. A
lot of people in our circuit are getting the live tweet updates.
And he goes, yeah, probably deserves a VOSAT somewhere. So he did a little story at 5, and then obviously there was more to do later. But it was just, how do you harness what feels like just a wind of wildness?
And that decision, can you talk a little bit more? How do we decide when an online spat becomes the news?
You know what? Sometimes, our news judgment is we think pretty good, and usually everything we've seen before. Mm-hmm. This is the exception. January 6th was the exception. The derecho was the exception. Those were a little bit easier to cover because it was obvious that was newsworthy.
Yes.
But these conversations that seem to be happening on X.
Yes.
What do we do with that? So what I do is I have news sources that I trust that are closer, that have actually reporters in D.C. I think New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, CNN, ABC, and see, are they going after this? Do they think there's legitimate newsworthiness in covering this? And, different people may have different feelings around, say, for example, Wall Street Journal, which is owned by Murdoch, which owns Fox News, and people feel, obviously, that there's a slant there. Then other people will say the same thing about CNN or MSNBC. So I like to look at everything. I even looked at Fox
wide
News.
range. But
Fox News had an article about it. And I thought, well, everybody else did too. When I saw it, and Fox News referred to Elon Musk as first buddy. And I lost it. I could not stop giggling.
Quite the title.
And he gave it to himself a long time ago, but I had not seen it in news copy written as like a first lady reference. So that reassured me that we were not reporting what is basically online gossip, or what you might, people are joking, you see on Bravo, not C-SPAN. But this is the most powerful man, arguably, in the world, President Trump, and the richest man in the world going at it.
Falling out and contracts are on the line.
Yes.
Business is on the line.
I mean, in Ukraine uses Starlink in its war after Russia invaded. And so we're talking about lives, not just livelihoods, are connected to the strings these men pull. So when they melt down, it's news. Yeah, it is.
And we are recording this Friday afternoon, so this is still going on.
It is.
I think last I read, Trump said, Elon wants to talk to me. I'm not ready to talk to him.
Yeah.
So we will see how that fallout
stay tuned.
Goes over the weekend.
Which we say a lot of.
Stay tuned. Things could change very rapidly on that front.
Now, on a hyper local basis, the story that I think made our newsroom in general sit back and go, what's going on here? Because like I said, after 26, 27 years of business, I feel like I've seen everything. And I've covered everything. Obviously, that is untrue. There's so many more surprises each and every day.
What a fun job.
Right, it is. It is. Be overwhelming. But a situation where police were called to a domestic violence situation in Cedar Falls. And when they got there, a man was already dead. He'd been shot in the back. And the woman admitted it. I killed my husband. I shot him in the back with this gun.
When the police arrived.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
She pulled it out of a Crown Royal, those, that alcohol. Am I saying that right? Crown Royal?
She had pulled
the gun.
Yeah.
She kept it in the purple velvet bag that Crown Royal liquor comes in. And I'm 48, and Crown Royal was very cool. So as soon as when I was younger, I'm old now and nothing's cool. So as soon as that description came up, and I'm like, that is very specific. So that she stores her gun in this way, or the family gun, whatever, in this way. And what would motivate a woman who'd recently been celebrated from the company she worked at, a landscaping company, for her retirement and serving 40 some odd years with the company? What happened? And the way she describes it, and obviously we only have her telling, Crown Royal, is that she and her husband were having a verbal argument. They were in their room. She felt he was going to hurt her. And their dog came up and intervened somehow. The dog either started barking or nipping at him. We have no idea how the dog got involved, but the dog was beckoned by their strong words to each other, apparently. And then he, according to the wife, turned his anger, the husband's anger, toward the dog. And he was chasing the dog out of the room, and she said, I will shoot you if you don't stop. And then she says she literally, in the criminal complaint it reads, she pulled the trigger. Shot him once in the middle of the back, and he died. And it is, it was just we've obviously seen situations of domestic violence that end in a fatality. The part that really kind of confused the newsroom, what we are not usually used to, is when there's an explanation that detailed the person still being charged with first-degree murder. And here's something I think we need to remind ourselves. She was arrested under the assumption she would be charged with first-degree murder, but I don't know if she's had her arraignment yet.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know if
those charges could be flexible or changed before the arraignment.
And we did talk to an attorney in Cedar Rapids. So the woman who is charged with first-degree murder out of Cedar Falls is Kimberly Charlton. She lives on Newland Drive, and that's where her husband was killed. And we talked to an attorney in Cedar Rapids from Viner Law Firm, and Tom Viner, I believe, and he said, I can't comment on this case. That's you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to really opine on this on a case that you're not in control of. And if he were part of the case, then he really couldn't talk.
Yes.
He just said, but in Iowa, since they changed the stand your ground law, you no longer have to retreat if you're scared. Your first act used to be, even if they were scaring you, you would have to try and get away before you could use deadly force. That's no longer the case. In Iowa, if you are scared and you're protecting yourself, you can use deadly force unless you're already committing another crime, like if you're in the midst of a robbery. And you are protected by the law. Now, we all know that me just saying that doesn't mean this woman will be protected from the law. There's a lot of questions here. What if the police got in the scene and her husband did not die in the way she described? We don't know. We don't have autopsy results.
We just have what she said.
Exactly. And all police know at this juncture is a woman has admitted to shooting her husband in the back.
And in the back,
yeah,
I think is kind of what makes you wonder, like, does it qualify for self-defense?
This is one we are going to be watching very closely, and I think a lot of people are. This is not a woman who had a lengthy criminal record. Mm-hmm. This is not a man who had a lengthy criminal record. This is not, by at least from what we can tell, online, overly troubled situation to the point where it caught the eye of law enforcement in the past.
Sure.
So, yeah, I mean, these folks were older. I mean, it sounded like at least maybe one of them had a walking cane. So, because it's described in the criminal complaint.
The way she describes it, it seems like this thing escalated so much she really believed the dog was in danger, perhaps.
Yeah, the victim, the man who died, her husband, exited the bedroom and retrieved a walking cane before re-entering the room, threatening to hit the dog. The victim then followed the dog out of the room and down the hallway. As he was walking away, she got her gun out of the Crown Royal bag and told him, I'm going to shoot you if you don't stop, and then she shot him. So it's a case that we will see if she is still charged with first-degree murder as it goes forward. I used to always talk when I moved here from Missouri. When I was in Missouri covering news, we very rarely had first-degree murder trials because people would plead down from what we used to call in Missouri a capital charge because Missouri has the death penalty. And so people would, to avoid the death penalty, would plead down, so that would be off the table. And then when you plea, there's no trial. We cover so many trials here. I'm not advocating for the death penalty by any means. It's just a difference I noticed as a journalist when we came here. And I think trials are really interesting. They're also wildly difficult to cover.
Very much so, very much so. But trials is, one area in cases. If there's not a trial, it's very hard for us to really get a lot of the information about what happened.
Oh, we often get the why in the trial. And isn't that obviously we want to know who died, who killed.
Right.
Where did it happen? Was it near my home, near my kid's school? But it's the, why did this happen?
Why did it happen?
We get a
Can it be,
how do I protect myself? Make sure that doesn't happen to me. I mean, we all have that instinct, right?
Right.
That's why trials, we do cover them, because we get a lot more information than we would get from the criminal complaint, which does give us some, but not anything close to what we really want. And obviously, we don't just want to focus on the person who committed the murder or the killing. Kimberly Charlton, her husband, David, as we've mentioned, did die, and I just want to make sure we say his name. David Charlton is the victim, according to police, in this case.
That will be very interesting to see the arraignment.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you. I have something that we've been covering for, I think, a week now.
Okay.
Maybe a week and a day. And it's made national headlines here in Iowa. Got us on some TV shows, got us a lot of commentary. Senator Joni Ernst, at what I believe was her first town hall of the year, made a comment that has now gotten a lot of attention. And we've got the clip here. So we're going to start out by letting you hear exactly what was said. So we're going to pull that up here. This was at Joni Ernst's town hall event in Parkersburg last Thursday.
They are not eligible, so they will be coming off. So people are not, well, we all are going to die. So for heaven's sake.
That last part there, where Senator Ernst says, well, we all are going to die. That's the part that has pretty much gone viral over the past week, and it's gotten a lot of attention. So the discussion, first of all, in that town hall was centered around the Medicare, Medicaid cuts that are being proposed in Trump's one big, beautiful bill. I always think I'm going to mess that up. And there were people asking questions. Why are you supporting these cuts? Why are you advocating for this bill? We are upset. And one woman shouts out from the crowd, people are going to die.
India May, we now know who it is.
Yes, we do. She launched a campaign?
She did.
Yes, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
She yells out, people are going to die. And Senator Ernst says, well, we all are going to die. And what's really been fascinating to me a little bit, in the days, the 3 or 4 days after and carrying on to now, is that the senator's tone and message every time when offered a chance to respond to those comments has stayed exactly the same. And we've got some of those responses. I got to hear from her a couple hours after that at a Google data center event that she was at.
That's right, in Cedar Rapids.
Here in Cedar Rapids, where she was asked if she wanted to respond to that bit going viral. She made another response voluntarily on her Instagram story. We're going to play those two responses back to back here.
Oh gosh, yes. And this is the hysteria that's out there coming from the left. And we're not talking about decreasing benefits for those on Medicaid. We know two things are true, death and taxes. And what I'm trying to do is make sure that we are extending tax benefits for hardworking Iowans and that we're preserving Medicaid for those that meet eligibility requirements. We don't need to see illegal immigrants receiving benefits that should be going to Iowans. So again, trying to do our best to make sure that our Iowans get the best, which means extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and making sure that those that are eligible for Medicaid are receiving those Medicaid benefits.
And I made an incorrect assumption that everyone in the auditorium understood that, yes, we are all going to perish from this earth. So I apologize. And I'm really, really glad that I did not have to bring up the subject of the tooth fairy as well.
So the tone there, you might notice, has stayed pretty consistent. But in that first response, she did offer some clarification, saying that she wasn't in support of cuts per se, but rather clarifying, who should be eligible and who should not, and wanting to make sure Iowans who need Medicaid have it. But from what I've seen, on the articles and people's responses on social media, it's the tone is really what's caused this clip to go viral.
The doubling down.
Yes.
And it's hard to tell in that second shot or clip you shared from her Instagram. So she's recording that.
Yes.
Or someone is holding the phone. We don't know which is which, but she's talking directly. Those are her words. This wasn't a gotcha in an interview. That was a planned delivery.
Yes.
She's in a cemetery.
She is. I've been hoping someone,
because you can see
would
one
ask
of
her
the
about that.
tombstones, like which cemetery. I don't know which cemetery she's in.
Yes.
But she's definitely in a cemetery.
Yeah, that was posted on Saturday,
Okay.
I believe. And I didn't see any other media things from her about an event in a cemetery or anything. So it's a little unclear why she was in a cemetery or if she chose to.
Was that the intended backdrop?
Yes.
Given the topic?
Pick that venue with the intentional striking of the chord with the tooth fairy comment.
Yeah.
There's some sarcasm there. There's a bit of poking there.
Yes, absolutely. And in her statement, when you talked to her right after she made the "well, we're all going to die anyway" comment,
Yes.
When you followed up with her in Cedar Rapids, that statement just struck me as so familiar. And I went back and listened to Congresswoman Hinson. She almost says the exact same thing at the town hall in Eastern Iowa a couple weeks ago when asked about this topic, and including, this is to preserve tax cuts for working people. This is to ensure eligibility is followed. And I would beg the question, if I could pause with both of the senator and the congresswoman and say, eligibility as it stands today, or the eligibility you want to include, the work requirement, which would be new, because we'll get to that in a moment. And then they end with, both of them did, because we don't want illegal immigrants using federal benefits. But what they don't say is using Medicaid, because there has not been found to be widespread use of illegal immigrants utilizing Medicaid, and it is currently illegal. You cannot access Medicaid if you do not have a status that allows it in terms of your citizenship. So I wonder if they're referring to a different federal program that maybe does allow illegal immigrants to access it. Maybe it's something to the effect of it covers hospitals if they have to serve people that don't have status, and hospitals are compelled by law to serve people if they are in dire need, like they have to be dying or close to dying. You can't just come in for like an earache. My understanding is they don't have to serve you all of everything, but a lot do, obviously. So it was stunning to me how their responses followed the same structure. It almost felt like it was from some guidance, some talking points to frame it this way. And as we know, the Big Beautiful Bill Act would increase requirements to be eligible for Medicaid, and that's where those cuts come in. So Joni Ernst, Ashley Hinson have points, and many other Republicans, including President Trump, when they say this isn't taking health care coverage away from people who would be eligible under the new law. But,
yes, but you have to say that very specifically.
Exactly, because people will lose coverage.
Yes.
About 8% of people who are currently on Medicaid, and keep in mind in Iowa, it's more than a third of all babies that are born to mothers who are utilizing Medicaid as what is paying for them to be able to go to the hospital and give birth. So this is not a small percent of our friends and neighbors. Quite a few people utilize Medicaid. And so I believe 92% will maintain coverage under the eligibility requirements. But the rub, according to critics of the work requirement changes, this is another barrier. You're having to get more validation, prove that you were employed. You're going to have to deal with more bureaucracy, deal with more paperwork. And for people who are in crisis or who are struggling or maybe have an illness, jumping through those hoops they're going to lose coverage even if they are eligible.
And it's interesting, given that, to frame this as saying, well, it's going to prevent illegal immigrants from accessing this program.
And that's why I think they say accessing benefits and not saying, I think they're being very careful with the words. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm reading too much into it because I trust no one and I have issues. And maybe they're claiming that illegal people who are in the country illegally are utilizing Medicaid. If that is the case, that is fraud. And that should absolutely be, that is not allowed under the current system. So that should be rooted out, obviously. But show me your receipts.
Yeah. Yes. And a lot of the frustration, I think, around the lack of directly answering that point of, well, people are going to lose access, and pointing to that. It's very interesting to hear that Hinson had similar comments.
Mm-hmm. And I think what people forget, we talk about SNAP benefits, which is obviously what we now call food stamps. And when you cut SNAP benefits, it obviously hurts families who rely on SNAP and changes their days, their lives. It also hurts grocery stores. Grocery stores do rely on that income stream that would normally not be there because people couldn't afford the food. When we talk about changing Medicaid, some of the loudest people screaming, please don't do this, are hospitals. Because these folks are, people who are sick and dying and in car crashes are still going to show up on stretchers and in ambulances and walking in. They're not going to not show up if they're really in need.
And then they're not going to pay at all, probably, or be able to.
You can't squeeze blood from a turnip. My husband's an attorney. He says it all the time, like, people don't sue poor people.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing there to get out of it.
That's fascinating.
So, well, yeah. Joni Ernst, you know, I'm on TikTok more than is healthy for a human being, especially one my age. Boy, people talking about her comments that you just shared.
It's everywhere.
It is everywhere.
It's on T-shirts.
People can't find Iowa on a map. People know who Joni Ernst is now.
Yes, absolutely. And she's had a couple of people, not a lot, but a decent amount, maybe 2 or 3 people declare a run for her seat in the past few days since those remarks. A few of them in direct response. One, the woman who made that remark. I remember her name.
India May.
Yes, and she has a very interesting perspective.
It's an easy story to tell.
Yes.
Now that everybody has seen Joni Ernst, has seen the comments.
It's an easy ad to run.
It's a very, absolutely, and I don't know if she would have run without that. If I were interviewing her, that'd be my first question. Were you considering a bid for senator before your moment went viral with Senator Ernst?
Yes, yeah. I believe she is active. I think speaking to the Des Moines Register, I believe she said that she's going to a lot of these town halls, actively engaging in these conversations. So maybe it would have been a next step for her, and at least exploring a bid.
And we hadn't heard that Senator Ernst was running for re-election, but she did this week
Announce her campaign manager.
So that gives a signal,
yes,
right?
We have a campaign manager now. It's not too far-fetched to assume there will be a campaign.
Exactly.
And she scheduled out her Roast and Ride fundraiser for, I think, October?
I believe
the fall for sure. I think October, don't quote me on that. And that is where she announced her last campaign.
Yeah.
So it seems
fitting.
We've had some other, probably a little bit more well-known names announce a bid for her seat. J.D. Scholten, the Democrat, he's the state representative. He did this in direct response to those comments, saying that he feels that Ernst disrespected Iowans and that, he feels they deserve something better. Nathan Sage has been in the race a little bit now. He's on the Knoxville Chamber of Commerce. On the Republican side, we now have Jim Carlin, a former state senator from 2017 to 2022.
And that's new.
It is new. I believe as of Friday today.
Okay, thank you.
He has announced. And he did previously challenge Chuck Grassley in 2022. That did not go his way in the primary. I think, yes, Grassley won 73%.
Got it.
So, Grassley's a pretty hard name to get some momentum against.
For sure.
And then we also have Joshua Smith on the Republican side. So we are getting, I think we were up to 5 now. 5 names, and some other folks have debated a run. Zach Walls, I believe, is debating a run for that seat. So it's getting to be kind of a packed primary.
Anytime there's a lot of hubbub and people have big feelings, like we have seen in response to Joni Ernst's comments, we're always in the newsroom, and I think the public at large have to ask yourself, are these people who are already aligned against her just getting out the trumpets and the bullhorns? Or are these people who sit on the sidelines of politics in general, or even those who may support her originally, showing signs of concern? And I think that these primaries, when they come up, will give us answers there. I tried to find if she was actively fundraising off of this viral moment. Like, look at me, I own the libs, kind of a...
The way that Ray Gunn is selling T-shirts over it.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I could not find anything that does not mean to say it doesn't exist, just that Beth Malicki couldn't find it.
Sure. I don't think I've seen any emails into our newsroom.
Exactly, because we get so many from...
We often, after a big, viral moment, we'll get emails from Republicans and Democrats saying, did you see this? We were just out talking, and we need $10 from you to keep our campaign running. We get those emails into our newsroom
from
all
all
the time.
sides.
Yes.
From all sides.
From every single candidate.
And so, it'll be. I'm just curious to see. Yes, it's very hot, and it's certainly this has gotten more legs than I thought it would have gotten when she first made this comment last week. Will it translate into an actual change in her seat? I think that will be a way we could try to measure that.
Yeah.
Fundraising and the primary, which is a ways off.
Which is. We have a long ways to go until 2026 still. All right. Anything else you wanted to chat about?
No, I mean, it's been an interesting, every week I think I say this, it's just been an interesting time to be working in news. A lot of people are talking about the things that we have to take away all emotion and just put information into. I will say, on a somber note, this week is the 1-year mark from a very difficult murder that our newsroom covered, and it wasn't singular, it's plural. There was the quadruple killings of 4 people in a garage outside of next to a property, a house north of Marion, off of Otter Road, and it was just a really confusing day. Having that 1-year mark reminded me of a year ago when we were first hearing inklings that there was all this activity in a rural area in Lynn County, and come to find out, I initially thought, oh, that is so obviously carbon monoxide poisoning. It just sounded like it. 4 bodies, one of them still breathing, airlifted to help.
Not in the main house, in like a garage, outbuilding.
In a garage?
Yeah, in an outbuilding kind of thing.
Where, carbon monoxide is so very dangerous. No, not at all. These 4 individuals were beaten to death. When law enforcement arrived, a man, Luke Truesdell, said, I hit all of them. And that confession is trying to be thrown out. His attorneys are trying to get that admission removed from evidence when his trial comes up for obvious reasons. We don't know a motive other than the criminal complaint detailed methamphetamine use, and that he cited that as an element of it, and that the 4 people were allegedly arguing, and that like something flipped inside of Luke Truesdell. This is another case where we're going to get much more of the why, and he did have a psych eval. They did look into his ability to help in his own defense, a competency hearing, and a psychiatrist testified that Luke Truesdell, is sane. So we'll get more insight into perhaps his state of mind, perhaps any mitigating factors. We know very little about the victims. Sadly, so it makes it hard to tell this story and honor victims appropriately, only because we know so little about them. But yeah, that trial, I can't remember when that trial is set for.
It's coming up.
Okay.
I believe.
Yeah.
I remember that day I was in Waterloo.
Really?
And I was on my way to another story, and I got a call from our boss.
Yeah.
And he just said, turn around, head to this in the town actually changed a few times because it's a rural home. That's developing news for you. I headed towards a vague area for about 45 minutes. And when he first called me, we had really no information. And he just said, go, we'll have a photographer meet you there, and we'll figure it out. And I drove for pretty much the whole time, got out of the car, met up with the photographer, and said, what is going on?
What is this? Yeah.
Yeah. And it was, we did, a couple hours with the live shots, and slowly the information started trickling in, but it was quite the day. Yeah.
The victims in this killing are Brent Brown, Romondus Cooper, Amanda Parker, and Kiana Ryan. And Luke Truesdell was known to them. He was not a stranger. And he was known to the people who lived in the house as well. But we don't also know much about him.
Very little. I mean, this is one of those cases where a trial will be critical to knowing anything about this publicly.
If they keep his confession in, we have seen this happen before in first-degree murder trials, the defendant will plead down.
Yes.
Because they recognize that I am screwed.
You gave a confession,
Yeah.
And if it stays, then that's hard to argue against.
And according to the documents on the motion to suppress that evidence, he apparently made additional comments that were incriminating after he was read his Miranda rights. The reason why they're trying to or the argument for why they want to get rid of that first confession where he said, I hit them all, is because he had not yet had his Miranda rights read to him because he, according to the police, was not yet under arrest. They're just trying to get information on what is going on.
I believe, yeah, he was just walking around the area, and they were like, hey,
Yeah.
know anything?
And they had a very brief conversation with him. It was like, so did you go into the garage? He goes, yeah. Which door? At the back door. What'd you do? I opened the door. I saw a dead person. What happened? I hit them all. I mean, I'm sure, I could not imagine being an investigator.
Yeah. And it was, I recall, it was a very large response. When I was out there
sure.
at the scene,
Yeah.
it was covered in larger than county sheriff, department vehicles, and investigators, and they were there for a very long time.
We focus a lot on, obviously, the defendant, the person accused of this crime, because he is the only one living in the court case. We give updates every single time, not every single time, but most times when there's something new, and we don't have that ability. There's for the deceased. So we generally do give more weight, more airtime, more coverage of the defendants in these kinds of cases, and people are frustrated by that. And I say I hear your frustration. In fact, we share it, and I don't have a solution.
It's very difficult unless, it's not always easy or possible for us to reach out to anyone who knew these folks. I know we did, right after this, reach out to some people who did know the victims, and in some cases people are willing to give information but not willing to speak on camera that's obviously very difficult for a lot of people. It is completely understandable to not want to speak on camera about something so tragic. And
not like one way of dying is worse than another, but murders can carry this we've seen it, just this overwhelming sense of loss without a reason that is satisfactory.
A trial, again, a great opportunity to hear
as of latest information, which could change because things get pushed back all the time.
Amen.
November 4th.
Oh, November 4th. Okay.
Okay, thank you,
That's not
producer
that far.
Elizabeth. November 4th is the trial date set for Luke Truesdell.
And you're right, the continuances happen
Yes.
so very frequently. And we learned this week, one trial has been continued because of chickenpox. Now that was a new one for me. Obviously, things were continued for COVID.
Wait.
We were used to that. Yeah. Andy Shaw, his first-degree murder trial.
Got delayed because of chickenpox?
Because somebody who needs to testify is in quarantine right now at a federal prison in which state? Pennsylvania, I think, because there's a chickenpox breakout in that prison, so he can't travel, and so he was going to testify by Zoom or some other similar apparatus.
Okay.
And Andy Shaw's attorney said, nope, we are invoking the right to confront your accuser clause. And Pennsylvania, thank you. We want him to travel to Iowa, this prisoner, to testify regarding this case.
Whoa, how long does chickenpox quarantine last?
I have no idea.
I guess I didn't realize that we did quarantine for chickenpox.
And during Andy Shaw's hearing regarding this matter, he also re-invoked his speedy trial demand. So now the clock is really ticking to get Andy Shaw was arrested, it feels like forever ago, on federal drug charges, and it wasn't until much later they charged him with first-degree murder in the death of Chris Bagley. So Andy Shaw has just been sort of sitting in limbo. I believe he's just sitting in the Lynn County Jail awaiting his trial to finally happen for murder. It's been a wild ride.
And now chickenpox.
And now chickenpox is delaying it yet again. I think it's been delayed like 4. I'm not going to give a number because it'll be wrong, but many, many times.
I do that. Yeah, that case has been around for a long time.
And that case is very, very, very complicated because it involves people who've changed their name. Johnny Church. At one point, we had a huge whiteboard in the newsroom trying to help new people understand the intricacies of this case and who was involved, because then we had another murder that was like somehow related to this one, and it was just the people crossed over. It's not like they were killing each other. Either way.
The names, yeah.
Chickenpox. Stay safe out there, folks.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us on your Trust Local podcast.
Have a great time.